So let's take a little look at how to use interview to uncover things more effectively. You can just go and ask, but that's not usually so. It doesn't usually work so well. Just go and ask them, and there are different reasons for that, and some of those reasons have to do with them not being guided deeply enough into the research and the aspects, the data or the empirical things that you want to uncover and find out. So we can look at it as a process that starts with an introduction. An introduction is very, very important. So you have come there, you meet this person, you're very polite and polished, and you are representing yourself at a company or with a person important enough to go and ask questions. You're representing students in general, and you're representing KTH. And of course, we want to be able to go back there with other students, or make a good feeling about it, so they'd be willing to participate more times. They, on the other hand, are probably interested in connections with students for the sake of being on the radar for students as a potential company to work at, and so on. Maybe they're curious about finding if you would be an interesting candidate, or somebody. There might also be ex-students. I mean, most people are, so they remember how it was to write a thesis, and now it's my turn to help, and so on. So this is a different. It varies in different cultures and countries how open people are, but here in Sweden and Scandinavia, it's fairly easy to get interviews if you address someone and can explain explicitly what made us look, especially for you, to find this out, and saying somehow that this research has an important point, some value, right? So this is maybe a hygiene criteria of behaving professionally and looking nicely. You don't have to go all the way with a tie and so on, but look tidy and being very polite. So thank you so much, blah blah, for your time. We know you're busy, etc. We are investigating, so just directing their attention towards the area you're going to talk about. And then now at this point you might be sitting in the room already, and then you will be interested in helping them to relax and open up, to try to preempt their worries and say this information will be used in this way and that way, right? Because then they don't have to be thinking about that when answering. Should I really say that? I don't know where it's going to end up, who's going to hear about it, who's going to read about it. This is how we'll use the information. Is this going to be confidential or not? Are you going to be anonymous or not? Is it okay if we record? It's just for our record keeping and being able to come back and transcribe if we need to, and so on. So all these things you ask early on to make them friendly, direct their attention, and make them relax and be willing to share. And they might have a question or so also. It's not uncommon. So then we also have at the end, we have an outro. So it's very important to end on a positive tone. So again, we thank them. You could say something if you have time that, okay, so our summary is these 5 things, and your experience is that when something goes right or wrong, it's the thing number 4, and just to bundle it out in something that they can confirm, and it makes them also feel relaxed and confident that, okay, they took away the right message. Because when they talk to you for an hour or so, they will care about what you understand. It's just a natural instinct. And you could ask, is there something we should have asked about that we didn't? Because your categories, maybe you have 3 categories of things that underpins motivation that we will use as an example here. Maybe they're not covering everything that this person has experience from being important. So it's pretty good to ask, were we covering the area, or was something that you were sitting half the interviews wanting to say that we didn't come into. It could be good also if you need more respondents, you can say, who else could we talk to? Who knows about this? So this is snowball sampling. It helps you get access to more people that have relevant information. Could help you get them interested if you say, we talked to Lars at Scania, and he said that you also know about this, or would be a person to ask about how it really works in more stressful environments or whatever. Then the person feels that, okay, someone who knows me have referred them. It's not just anybody coming in talking to me, and my knowledge is important, so they feel a little bit validated and seen. So it's very useful. So not only for sampling reasons, but for actually having people willing to participate. And then again, when you are going to write your analysis and so on, you might realize that, oh, we only asked 1 of 10 this very critical thing. So you always ask, can we contact you again if we need to make a complementary question or some follow-up? They almost always say yes, and you almost never need to. But anyway, you can ask that, because then it's okay to contact them. Again, you're representing yourself in KTH and students, so it's very critical that you do this very well. It should be a planned thing how to handle the interview. Then we come into the actual data collection, or trying to dig out how does the world work here. What is it that is the mechanism behind what we are studying and so on. So usually we want to go from open questions to closed questions, but we should start with a general insight. And now time management might be an issue here. If you have only half an hour, you need to really go straight for the key things. If you have an hour or more, it's useful to get the person's perspective on what is happening, the person's feeling and view of what is management of people about, how do I make my co-workers or employee motivated and so on, without too much constraints. So the idea is to get unbiased information. So that means that we shouldn't direct the question, otherwise we control the whole attention span and association for that person, and you will not pick up what's really there in their real life experience maybe. So open questions, very broad, general, unbiased, or maybe we would say undirected. You don't say almost anything about what you're after.
Okay.
So the first might be like, what do you do a typical day? Or please describe the current state of your market, or something like that. Because you need that information, and you need to understand this person will have opinions about everything you ask, but what are they really knowledgeable about? Maybe they are working only on some part and have opinions on all the others that are not related to direct experience. And then you go into maybe more precise areas, and you follow the branches that come out here. So the current state on the market is that it's consolidating, and but it's growing in external, in foreign markets, but consolidating in our market, and so on. So there's different areas. So if you're two people, typically good to have one that has the question or area list, and the other's making an issue tree, or what you call it, a mind map, and get, okay, here was 3 different paths, and then you go into the first path first, right? And then the second. So you try to find out for each of these branches that came out in the first question, more information. How does this work? Why do you do it? What happens if you don't do it? Who are there? And so on. So preparing team meetings is something came up here in what they do every day or on a daily basis. And you're after motivation of employees. Okay, so preparing team meetings, what's the typical process like? So we'll describe that, one of the branches here. And then get into the details. Could be like, how often do you consult the legal team for such a problem? You know, if it comes up here, that in some cases they need to consult legal, right? You want to find out how often does it happen, what's it about, when does it not happen, and so on. So just follow it to get all the details. And then in the end you will have basically closed questions. Is this the case, or so on. So if you cover legal consultations, making an agenda, and then blah blah, are you done then? Is that complete picture of what reasonably complete picture of what it involves in preparing these meetings, for example. Right. So going through that for some time to get an overview and both from overview and then into detailed insights, what they're doing is useful if you have the time. If you don't have the time, you might just go like 2 steps here and go into your construct. Or just ask them, what is your responsibility here? And they describe that, and then you move on. Now you go into your construct. That is the sub-issues that you break down your research question into certain things that should be important, because we read previous theory and we have some knowledge. We know that it's not only one thing, it's more parts to it, and we take them one at a time. Could be that it came up here also, so that you can link back. For that, let's say for motivation, stress is a factor. We go into stress questions. So the first person who has the little protocol or a semi-structured sheet of questions, we go into that and start asking questions about it. The other person will do an issue tree for stress and make sure that we go into each branch and then move on when we were done. So what makes you feel stressed at work? Then comes up a little different, some different things come up, and you say, all right, when do you feel that you have little influence? What is making that occur? What situations and so on? Yeah. So is this occurring when you have team meetings, for example? That's more precise and looking into something you already established. And then if Lars would quit, would you feel listened to them? So that's a question that tries to confirm your understanding of what the person is saying, and it's like yes or no. It's a closed question. You feel you have little influence, but it relates to a certain person being not particularly nice to work with. Maybe it happens in team meetings or not, and that makes you suspect that is it certain people or is it certain task, and then you're going, okay, it's whenever this person is involved, it's impossible to have your opinion heard. Okay, so if they would quit, would you feel listened to, I think? Probably. Okay, then it confirms that this is the reason. Here you go back and forth now till you have all these sub-branches in the mind map, and then you go into the other constructs one by one and do the same thing. So here's like a negative thing, here's like a positive thing that you have. What made you feel motivated? And why did this, so it's like being talking to someone or doing something. So why did this conversation make a difference? So you're more narrow, but still rather open. Is it more motivating to be listened to than to be rewarded? Now you're comparing two things to find out, right? Which one is the bigger deal? So, and then you can ask a close question. So if you get a bigger bonus, work would be more fun, right? Basically, these levels that you try to branch out in a structured way. And if you have little time, running out of time, some people talk too much. Some people will just say minimum, but if you're running out of time, you might need to prioritize. You shouldn't have loaded questions. You shouldn't have directing questions or guiding questions that suggest a certain answer and so on. But there are some exceptions. So specifically on this more specific levels, on more detailed levels, you can use guiding questions. So one guiding question is projection. That means that you suggest a situation and ask, if this was the situation, what would happen then, or would that be the case? So you make up a hypothetical scenario. So if I'm interested in bribing, I will ask, do you think a lot of people in this industry get offered bribes? It's a sensitive question. If you ask the person in front of me, do you take bribes? They will answer no. It's a sensitive question, so we'll project it outside. Or we could say that if X quits, will that make a huge difference? That validates our forming conclusion about what's going on here. It's called a projection, a hypothetical scenario. Here we have another one. If you got more money, that would be great, right? And make you feel happy at work. It's a loaded question because it suggests a certain thing as the answer. But we load it in the opposite way than our conclusion is. So we think that, let's see here, it's more important to be listened to and say, wait, than to be getting money. And say, maybe after a few questions here, okay, so am I getting this right? If you just, had a big bonus and connect it to what you do, that will be making a huge difference. And then they will say no. Sometimes they just say yes on, a reflex or without thinking too much. But if you say something wrong, they'll be like, no, that's wrong. So first of all, you get your conclusion confirmed, but they don't know it. They think you got the wrong idea, but this was on purpose. But they also go into explaining even more things about, no, money doesn't motivate me at all because blah, 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 blah. And actually, if I don't get listened to, I wouldn't stay here at all. So you get not only confirmation, but also extra information, right? This is called baiting. Be a little bit careful so you don't, make the person annoyed or something. Yeah. Or you say after, it's like, oh yeah, I'm just trying to verify my hypothesis. Right, so this is basically what I had, but rather than, going in and just talking to someone, you need to be prepared. You need to have your categories. You need to stay open for something maybe coming up that you didn't have, because that's a part of the discovery. And follow it where it takes you, and try still to in the end be covering most of what you need. And then you keep doing interviews until more or less the same things come up again and again. So how many interviews do I need? Well, it depends. But if you're at interview 12 and you get it's just the same things more or less to 90%, then you have saturated your data. So it's basically it's not very much value in conducting another interview. So you have to draw the line somewhere and say that right now we have the 2 last interviews didn't reveal any new categories or any new information about the categories that we have. So we'll say that this is where we draw the line, and now we focus on trying to process this into findings and conclusions and all that.
Let's say if I have sometimes I wonder, you're gonna do a questionnaire and then you're gonna come up with an outcome, and then you're gonna do interviews. So it's either gonna confirm your outcome, or sometimes it contradicts your outcome.
Mm.
When it contradicts, that's a good thing or a bad thing. I would assume it seems like a bad thing, but I would say it's a new insight, isn't it? Like if I have info in my interviews, the outcome I came with is contradicting my outcome from the surveys, let's say. What does that say?
If your outcome in the interviews contradicts your survey, the interviews should be what is your base for conclusions, and you need to think about what came up that explains that the outcome in the survey didn't work, right? It's often better to do interviews first, so you ask the right questions in the survey and know that, right, I've done a few interviews, so now I can ask questions about the right things, and that makes it more likely that your survey will obtain more useful information, statistically useful information. And doing a survey is a lot of work, and it's really useful and fun and interesting, but you need to know what you're doing, because if you gather data that you can't do any statistical analysis on, it's not of much value, right? If you can't do a hypothesis test, you can come to a finding and confirm your conclusions. So having knowledge about multivariate statistic methods, so you can ask questions the right way in the right amount and with scales and so on, is you need to have some understanding and knowledge about that, or you will be zero likely to have a good survey that you can use for something. But that's also something that supervisors should help with. So.
And let's say if I have like my area of research, there are a lot of people who are doing research in that area. They are, let's say, if I'm examining like some, what do you call this, some factors related to attitude or perception and so on, there is a lot of people who did already surveys and so on in that area, and usually they include it in their papers and so on. So is it okay always to get those questions and ask them?
It's preferable.
Okay.
It's preferable to use already tried and tested questions. And then you can also, if you're lucky, compare your group with their groups and so on. So try to find, for the different constructs that we call them, the underlying major areas, factors, find questions from previous surveys if you can. That's best.
For a study which is qualitative in nature, and I would expect answers which are verbose and from which I have to derive information. I would not be using statistical tools to evaluate the answers. So to establish a pattern from those answers, how many such interviews should I be doing on the...
Yeah. So there are ways to quantify interview data. The question is if it's useful, right? How many, so you can divide your information up in categories, and then you can see how often does this category come up. What some factor under stress here influence. But it might not be more important because it comes up more often. It might be something one person said once that is really the key thing, but that person was just able to phrase it or formulate it into the core of the problem somehow. So usually you're not quantifying qualitative data unless there's a very good reason to. So then your question was, how do I know when I have enough? So when not more information come up, that's one thing. And of course, you need to cover all your subcategories, not only once, but with a couple of interviews. So you don't only rely on one person's statements. So I would think about that.
For example, I could have something in the theory which I'm trying to study, and I'm trying to establish if it is working if it is actually working. I may go and interview people in 2, 3, 4 companies, but after that, how many more should I be interviewing? Because each of these companies may confirm to be, they may confirm to the theory, but in like how they do it can be very different for each of them.
Yeah.
So then I just say that how they do it is different, but they are all finally using that theory and are confirming to it.
Yeah.
So
that could be the case.
So then how many companies should I go on interviewing?
Yeah, it's not with one, really. I mean, if you are looking at look at how Martina is feeling about becoming a master graduate, you interview her. There's no point in interviewing others. So it depends on the question. So it's not something I can answer like that. But you won't be interested in confirming the theory with your interviews, because that's not usually a research question that fits for qualitative analysis. Rather, it's about how are they actually doing it, or what are they thinking about it when they're doing it, like co-construction of new products and services. How is that actually happening, and is it something that makes a difference, make people more motivated, or better? Does it turn into better products? Well, you can do that quantitatively, but you can also do it qualitatively and see what did you come up with at this company, and which processes did you use, and why was this result connected to how you did it. So it's not something that has an answer in a number. But it's good to cover your categories a few times. It's good to go on until not too much new information comes up. You will have something new in every interview, but if the same things come up and you get maybe not the same answer, but the same type of opinions about it that you already have, then you're pretty much done to start writing.